I want to do marker.
Marker. Oh, I love marker. Stockers and order fillers. Okay. Full-time and unskilled and light is 1.6 million jobs. 1.6 million jobs. So we've really got our work cut out for us when they identify marker, because the baseline of the ORS and the combined with the OEWS is that there's a ton of jobs. A ton of jobs. You get occasional contact with others or no public contact. Let's try occasional contact with others or less. Only 4% of jobs. We've now whacked it down from 1.6 million to 65,000 jobs. 4% of jobs. And I'm just getting started. I'm just getting warmed up. Okay, so write down 65,000 jobs.
And is that from that information come from the ORS?
It does. And the OEWS.
I want to ask something about that. So there's other DOTs in that SOC code. It's like, well, it has to do with logical reasoning. So just because that doesn't mean that it's just markers.
Who cares?
Right?
Who cares?
You know what I'm saying?
Who cares? I'm using marker as a example of light unskilled work that's in stockers and order fillers.
Well, my point was that can't a vocational expert say, yes, but that number includes other DOT codes, and all the markers that I've seen don't have any interaction really with others, or very little.
Okay, then it must be 65,000 jobs that fit that category. Because we are going to exclude everybody that has more than occasional contact. And if you're actually telling me that markers don't have any contact with others, then I need to mark no contact. And now we're down.
I'm sorry.
2,000.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So if we're only
Okay.
going to count the jobs that have no contact with others, then the number of stockers and order fillers, including markers that have no contact with others, is 16,000. If it's occasional contact with others, it's 65,000. If it's no limitation there, but no external customer, no important external customer contact, we're down to 98,000. If it's no limitation there, but there's no teamwork involved, teamwork is not important, we're still down to 65,000 jobs. So every limitation other than occasional bending and stooping, no exposure to unprotected heights, no exposure to pulmonary irritants, most of those are going to be nonsense. Okay, but let's get into our 2023 data set.
Well, you also haven't eroded on the basis of exertional level yet, because the 2023 data set does not capture that.
Okay.
The 2024 data set does.
All right. So now we're down to less than 10,000 jobs with occasional contact with others. There we go. Thank you, Russell. All right. So we're down to less than 10,000 jobs in the nation.
Can I just jump in?
This less than includes the SVP one is different. Go ahead.
So this is just using ORS by itself.
And
correct? And what? I'm sorry?
And the ONET.
And the ONET. And okay. So what happens if the vocational expert just says, I don't use those sources, then we're using sources that are recognized by Social Security, obviously. Correct?
If the agency has disavowed the ONET to the extent that it's inconsistent with agency policy, this was the PDF that I sent you guys recently. SSA policy, POMS.
Well, does the ORS take care of it by itself?
Everything is a puzzle, is a piece of the puzzle.
Right.
Okay, so it's 21065 Rev 2. And what the agency actually says about the ONET, the Occupational Information Network, is that the ONET does not define physical exertion requirements in a way that is consistent with SSA regulations. And they're citing the physical exertion demand regulations. ONET instead groups lifting activities with rules defining non-exertional climbing, handling, and stooping and handling, which it doesn't. Accordingly, the information in the ONET is generally not usable in our adjudication process. So what does that statement about the ONET, because that's the clearest statement about the ONET that the agency has ever provided. What does that statement have to do with the ONET statements, cognitive, stalkers, and order fillers? What does that have to do with contact with others? Nothing. And so the agency takes administrative notice of reliable government published data. And is the ONET reliable government published data? Do you use the ONET in any other part of your practice? And the judge may interrupt and say, Your Honor, counsel, the vocational expert has testified that she doesn't use it or he doesn't use the ONET. Great. I'm asking you to take administrative notice of it.
So I have a situation where I had something like that happen with Coulter. And he told me that back before he was an ALJ, there was no need for vocational experts. Many people got lawyers, and now all of a sudden you're coming up with this new fancy argument about the ONET and me asking me to take administrative notice of reliable government data. And I looked at him and I said, "Hey, don't shoot the messenger." I was like, but I want to make sure that if my client's gonna get denied because there's jobs out there that this person is saying that that there actually are these jobs with these limitations available. And he just turned around and then asked the VE, "Do you use the ONET? Have you used it? Would you ever use it as a reliable data source?" And of course, the VE said no. So at that point, what do you do? In the hearing. I know post-hearing what to do.
No, no.
I'm talking about in the hearing.
Here's what the Department of Labor says about the ONET. On its webpage, reproducing the DOT. If you were looking for current occupational information, you should use the ONET.
And where is that? The Department of?
The Department of Labor dol.gov/agencies/OALJ, Office of Administrative Law Judges, topics, libraries, libdot. If you type labor libdot, you'll find it.
So how would you answer that question?
Which question?
Not the question, but what do you follow up after that? After the VE says no?
That they used to not use vocational experts?
No, when he turns around and says, "Well, do you use the ONET? Do you not use? Would you use the ONET?"
In your private practice,
Mm-hmm.
you have a private practice, right?
Okay.
I assume you have a private practice. In your private practice, do you use the ONET for any purpose at all?
No.
You've never used the ONET? Were you ever trained to use the ONET?
It's not something that I normally use.
No, I asked if you were ever trained when you were in
No.
education to use the ONET.
So if that person says no?
Well, you've now got them in a box where they're lying because
Okay.
they are trained to use the ONET. And most vocational experts do admit to me that they use the ONET in their private practice. And
Okay,
my
so
follow-up question is, do you find it to be reliable?
For some things, that's what they say.
All right, great. So in terms of collating all of this data about how often people have contact with others, whether face-to-face, by telephone or otherwise, because that's the way it's defined, who is in a better position to gather that data and to report that data to Office of Management and Budget Standards? You or the Department of Labor?
So I've gotten to that point as well. And then I get interrupted by the judge.
One more
to-
question. One more question. Do you have any statistical basis for disagreeing with the ONET that 3% of stockers and order fillers have occasional contact with others and just 1% have no contact with others?
I like that.
Do you have any, what is your basis for that? And if they go back to their education, training, and experience, which is the go-to for a vocational expert, the question is very simple. And and I derived this question from a small court back east. Very few people sit on this court, but the question is simple. How do you extrapolate your local experience to the national economy? And please challenge me on where I got that question from, Judge. Please quit challenge me.
Okay.
You know
Thank you.
where I got the question from, Monica?
Yeah.
Where do I get it from?
The Supreme Court decision.
BSTEC.
BSTEC. There you go.
Okay. How do you extrapolate your local experience to the national economy? Matt and I went over this the other day. Okay. If you want a 95% confidence level and the number of jobs in the national economy for stockers and order fillers is 2.7 million, and you want your margin of error to be 5%, 5%, that's a huge margin of error. All of you have voted, or well, not all of you, but you're familiar with the polls, right? They're plus or minus how many percent? 3?
Yeah.
All right. If the sample size is looking for a margin of error of 5%, you have to do 385 job analyses of stockers and order fillers to get a reasonably valid sample. But if you drop it to the standard 3%, it jumps up to 1,067 jobs. Are you telling me that a vocational expert did 1,067 job analyses?
Well, did the Department of Labor?
Yes. Because OMB wouldn't let them publish the data if they didn't. When you look at the data that the Department of Labor publishes, okay, so all of these dashes, Eric, tell us what all these dashes mean.
The if it's a dash, then they did not if scroll down to the bottom. All the way down to the bottom. A single dash designates that there's no data reported for that SOC group. A double dash designates that the occupational requirement is not reported in the data set.
Okay. They don't have valid data. They don't have valid data. The Department of Labor does not have valid data, but this vocational expert with anecdotal local experience knows everything about this occupation, and they didn't do 1,000 job analyses. And if it's 270,000 jobs, it drops down to 1,063. Are you telling me that the vocational expert did for production workers and for stockers 2,000 job analyses?
So we could just ask them, what was your sample size?
How many times have you studied this job? The, who's the vocational expert he has a little bit of a lisp? You know what I'm talking about? Nice guy. Super nice guy. You guys are no help. He says, I've seen it. It's like, I don't just doubt that you've seen it. What I doubt is that there are 20,000 of them. That's what I doubt, because there aren't. There aren't 20,000 of them.